Well, hello everyone. Well, we've had technical difficulties this morning. When we replaced a monitor, one of the three monitors, everything went fine for a few days, and now it has decided, as when we were doing the tech check, the pre-show stuff, it fidgeted, acted up, and we fiddled with it, worked around that, got that going. We start in advance of the show time to get this to you, and we've got that going. Now, when we went back to then do the audio checks, monitor was gone. Now these are not to look cool, to look radio-ish. They're actually there because I need to hear what is going on in between bits and pieces. There's also a delay in the live stream that goes there, and what we end up doing is needing these headphones desperately. They also help keep the feedback down, the echo down, and it works. So we did that, got all of that up and going, finally got audio, delayed the show 30 minutes, got it running, and we had microphone troubles as well. Same system disruption caused that. Why this doesn't show before we do the day of tech check, don't really know, but welcome to a Windows-based computer system. Now, before we go on with the main show, we have to take care of one thing for regulation before I forget about it. Anytime I'm dealing with anything with real estate, I always like to run the little advertisement, make sure I've done that properly, although it is not advertising a residential opportunity, a housing opportunity. I just like to keep clear of the government and make everybody happy. So what do you say we get the commercial out of the way? Dell Delbridge, Benchmark Realty, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. If you're currently unrepresented and would like to know how to compare up to 3 properties side by side, room by room, then go over to my new YouTube channel, subscribe while you're there, watch the demo. Afterwards, get with me and we'll set up your exclusive account today. Well, hopefully that wasn't too painful. Now, the hardware trouble with the audio is only part of it. Now, my guest that was scheduled for this week did call a day or so in advance and say that he has an issue. Quite honestly, he'd been out of town. There'd been an issue with the family, and one of his people had to go elsewhere, leaving him at the house to have to work with the children, and with school in Rona in the state that they are, someone had to be there to assist the smaller peoples in the household. So we do hope to have him back on. We've got future shows. We have at least one, if not 2 different 1031 specialists that we're talking to. We're going to have Bond Mortgage come back in. They haven't been here yet, but they're going to come back in and talk to us about the industry, what's going on there with appraisals and things of that nature. And we're going to have, hopefully we'll have Momentum Title back in, and as always, my friend Zach over at Loan Depot. So we are happy to have the people work with us, and it's a great if we're going to have a complete failure of the software, today was a good day to have it. Now, without a guest to converse with, we're going to have to talk about world events and how they affect the economy and our real estate market in general, both nationally and locally, because we're not going to really get into politics. Politics and sales don't work real well, but there's just the reality is world events and then even national events of this current unprecedented time that we're living in is going to have an effect over our future. So let's get to that, and I remind you, this is not an attempt to be political, but it's simply the way it is. We have the politics runs the economy runs politics, vice versa. We've got a disease running around out here doing both of those. And so how does that affect real estate, short-term and long-term? And that's what today's show is. How does the current environment impact residential offerings in the short-term and long-term? So let's get with it. All right. Now I have a screen here. Let me make sure I'm keyed up on the right one, and I am. Here we are. So on this particular one, the subject of this one is, I don't know if you remember that rather colorful character, he with the beard thing, but he was with the Too Darn High party, and he was rented as just too darn high. Well, I think this is a little play on that gentleman. I hope he's doing well. And anyway, we get down to the middle of this. It says in Manhattan, the median rent for an apartment dropped from $35.21 in 2019 to $31.67 in July 2020. That decline, the property called most significant annual decline in almost 9 years of record keeping. So what does that mean? It means that something's going on making the supply and demand off kilter to the degree that we actually affect our rents. Let me do a little rent back check back here, slide back. You might get my code books in the background, but it keeps me a little better centered. Okay, so what does affect the rent prices? Obviously, occupancy rate. And if we have people leaving apartment buildings for any number of reasons, they may be because they're leaving it because of they've lost their job and can't afford to rent and they have to get out. They may be rooming up with somebody, temporary displacement we call that. They also may be permanent displacement. They may be a migration of people away from the big cities. Now we know that masks are not really effective, the science tells us, and we know that it's not a touch-borne disease. So we really have to kind of look at what does work, what doesn't work, and we find out about the only thing that works for this particular airborne virus, is social distancing. And can we social distance for the rest of eternity and all the generation that come across? Well, that affects the urban model. And the urban model is we bring a lot of people in a very short space, and then what we do is by having so many people in that small area, we go vertical, and so we have our revenue per square foot for our city operation to go way high, and we have economies of scale, so we can do mass transit and other wonderful things and stuff of this nature. It's great in theory. The downside to high density living is it can affect in a pandemic. Now, I think we had SARS-1 and MERS about 10 years apart. One was a few years ago, the other, I think, in 2002. So we knew a pandemic was coming. Fauci actually said we knew a pandemic was coming. We were getting right for one, kind of like an earthquake. We expect them. So it's not like the big cities should not be rip-roaring, ready to go, and adequately prepared to deal with this type of problem. What should be, could be, and what is today are all different things. And today, the rent prices in New York are dropping quickly because of multiple reasons. Some of them are going to be the elevation of taxes that they're talking about doing. There's some of it's going to be the density. People are afraid of the density again, and also the loss of income. So in New York, think of it not as Nashville, because it's not, but it is the canary in the cage. And the canary in the cage says when our epicenter of our financial wealth of this nation, which is Wall Street and all that centered in New York, when we see that take a hit in these temporary indicators such as rent, now what do we think it's going to do in the long-term indicators in terms of housing in our area? Because again, we're going to look nationally, we're going to look internationally, we're going to try to look locally to see what is the effect of this financial what is 2020 doing to our future. All right, let's get back to it. Now we have another one. I think it mirrors the first one. Let's slide up here at this. It is going to be that the rents across New York City, tens of thousands of units available. Now that sounds like a whole lot of vacancy. But I think if we were to be honest and look at it, we have to realize that there are about 19, 20 million people in New York. So, tens of thousands may seem astronomical to us, but really it's not a big ripple. It is, of course, you're going to have your biggest ripple where you drop your pebble, right? But what you're not going to have when you drop that pebble is it's going to dissipate as it goes further out. It'll take time to get there, and it'll be a little smaller as it goes. New York is our financial center. New York hits the pebble drops. We get big waves. Tens of thousands, they say, are now available. And that may be true. I'm sure it's true. If it's on the internet, it's got to be true, right? So, but we do see rents are falling in New York. Availability is coming up. Supply and demand says when you got a lot more of something, you drop the price to induce people to buy it. And if you have a scarcity of something, the prices go back up because there's fewer there's fewer items to sell than more people want them. Supply and demand. Now let's look at our next slide we got going on. Back when this was beginning, back in around April when we had our shutdown, the prevailing theory through the money markets, the New York based, most is Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, all New York based, all of that looks great. They said this is an artificial issue, meaning we don't have the net of the economy driving things south. Everything is good. It's great guns. It's just an environmental issue, and we have deliberately shut the economy down. We'll shut it down for 2 weeks, be right back up. And they expected that little ripple, worse in New York, to go through. And unfortunately, what we found out in the real world was, let me get my mouse back over here. What we found in the real world was we dropped that ripple down, it rippled out, and it wasn't just one stone falling. They kept us way past 2 weeks. Way past 2 weeks. 2 weeks became 4 weeks and 8 weeks, and now we're headed on 6 months of this nonsense. And that's going to flatten that recovery that we see here. We're going to look over here at this recovery. If we see that it comes down, it's going to drag it out. It's still going to be V-shaped. And we're going to look for that natural tendencies of us human beings to get back to life as it was pre-corona. And that's what this next one's for. We saw last week, we saw a couple of good things, and I don't have the one on the Dow Jones. It spiked up to a huge all-time record high in a swing top to bottom. But we also see that the spending has gone up. We dropped down, we've come back up. So our spending level, this is an indication of confidence in our economy. We're believing we're coming back, we're feeling good. If in fact, I'm not saying there is, but if in fact there's any kind of a politics affecting this, pretty soon we're going to have an election, and that'll be over one way or the other. It's going to be done. So there's confidence coming back, schools are coming back, everything is beginning to come back. Our spending and our life is coming back. That's looking good on the short term, but this is short-term spending. Amazon hit all-time record high. I think the NASDAQ is still doing really well. All of our financial markets are doing their best to not be depressed and disappointed. So what we look at other things, I'm looking at Caterpillar and some of the heavy equipment, durable goods, they dropped. And they dropped significantly. And the reason they dropped significantly, quite honestly, is because this is a huge capital outlay. We have our low use of money cost, but we're going to see if we don't have growth back, we don't need the machines to do the building. And so people will delay the big ticket items in order to keep people employed and going. And what this says is, by the region, North America machine sales sank 38% after falling 40% in June. Asia Pacific 5%, 7% June, Latin America. And we see that, of course, we are the biggest economy. So we have it there. So of course it's going to hit us hard. But this is heavy equipment, and this is more of a long-term indicator. I think that there's some tightening of some issues coming on. So we're looking at rent being a kind of a short cycle. It feels like a long time when you sign a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year lease, but it's really a short cycle type of thing versus a mortgage at 10 years to 30, that sort of thing. Now we want to look back at this one. What does that affect the gross product, the gross domestic product? And we see that we have taken from the good days of running positive to Rona hitting us, we've dropped way down. And that's going to be because so many people aren't working. Well, you can't knock 20% of your workers out of a job and expect it to go well with your economy. So we're down right now. That is July. It's not bad in our area, but it's bad nationwide. And a lot of people are suffering, especially the more urban they were, the bigger the economy's taking a hit because they won't let them go back to work. In fact, I don't have a slide for this, but if you were to go to Victoria in Australia, they still have them on lockdown and with a curfew in Australia. In fact, I've got a slide coming up here. I'll show you in a minute because I'm talking about the world event, how different parts of the world react differently in what they're going to feel when this thing comes out. We know we've got a hit coming. We've hit a huge change in our gross domestic product. So let's look at how that affects our national debt. What's going to come is national debt. Now, this is an old chart. You always have to look at your pictures when you look at them. When were they run? This is no one only go. This is a projection, pre-Rona projection. That's the reason I've got this up. It was showing that we were having a better economic policies, and we were slowing that slope. So we were actually growing our debt, but it wasn't as outrageous as it was during the Obama years. During the housing crash years of 28 to 2010, we saw tremendous debt coming up there. We're slowing down. We're looking good. Pre-Corona, this is the path we're on. Now we're going to look at, well, here's some more of this, just some by spending. The reason I have this isn't to pick on parties, but you see each one of these little blocks is a debt ceiling. And what debt ceiling is it's like daddy cutting you off. Your credit card company cutting you off. You spend enough money, you're going to get cut off on this. Let me get that picture over there for you. Okay? Now, here we go. We've got the debt ceiling, and the debt ceiling cuts off, and they keep raising up, As long as you keep raising that debt ceiling, you're going to keep spending. And this dates back to 2010. This was that previous growth. Let's go back to that previous chart to make sure that I was watching the monitors. Here's the previous chart. What we had going on here is the debt. And we see during these years, the 2010, 28, 2010, right in this area, 28, 2010, we had our housing crisis, and that was some very bad fiscal policy. And we see the effect of that. That's affecting our debt. And afterwards, as we start to come into more rational fiscal policy, we flatten that out a little bit. It's still going up, but it's going up flatter than it was in the previous when we had such reckless spending going on. And then I go back to this one, and this one is the one that I was going to show. The only purpose of that is a debt ceiling. It really doesn't go, it really shows that those years, those 28 to 2010 years when we had our debt crisis, when we had the things that caused this problem, which was the crazy spending, irresponsible spending at the national level. And then we go back into where are we going to be now? Let's flip to this one. Okay. When we were talking about let's take 2 weeks for the team, we were back here in March and April. And we did see our peak, and we started coming down. And we were looking very good until about the 4th of July. We were down to nothing like we are now. Now, these numbers elevated back up as we associate and attribute debt, the events, the deaths that go back in time, and the paperwork catches up. So we go to that. Now, getting back to this, we saw this increase. Now, what happened here? What happened here? And we go to, of course, it was the protest. We were under social distancing unless they were protesting and they do anything they want to, and that resulted in this spike. I don't think there's any doubt whatsoever that that's the spike has resulted. It comes in, it was about the 1st of July, and we see they peak up, but we go back to social distancing and it drops back down. And I think that's going to be the way things go. Now, the masks don't seem to work, the science says. The washing the hands don't seem to work, the science says, because it's not that type of virus. We've learned everything that we knew at the first. Turns out it was wrong. So we're learning how to respond to the coronavirus. And the virus is apparently airborne, and so the social distancing works. The question is, can we social distance? We can quell the disappointment in national events. But this is what happens when we have thousands upon thousands of people in public together. We had the outbreak. We peaked. We've got that going back in. Now we want to look at specifically the age group, because we have a lot of people very nervous about children going back to school. Well, when we still look at the bulk of how this affects people, unless you're a very sick individual, it's not really affecting the school-aged children. And there are 58 million school-aged children in America. They have the lowest mortality rate. Are they going to be exposed? Are they going to have infections? Yes. Are they going to have the mortality? Not really. It's not gearing toward it. Now let's look at how other countries are doing it. How is this affecting the world economy? Well, the New Zealand Prime Minister is from the Labour Party, and she has just recently postponed national elections by 4 weeks because they saw a surge in cases, not deaths, but cases. They saw a surge in cases, and she postponed the elections by 4 weeks, ostensibly to save lives. The problem is it was only 9 cases nationwide. 9 cases she postpones the elections. Now, here are the charts according to Worldometer. Total coronavirus cases, which means at this point in time, around April, because it's a very socially distanced country, there's not much down there but a few hobbits, some movie people, a little bit of industry, and mostly agricultural. I think cattle are a big export. So essentially, these are the total cases. And when you don't see a slope, there weren't any adding on it. So they were like none. They were like done to none. They see 9 cases come up, and she postpones the elections. The effect on the economy is going to impact them a little bit less because they're agricultural, and it really didn't get them too much in the cities. But this is just how some countries react versus other countries. Our financial district is held in New York, a very dense population, and we know that social distancing is what they need to work. Now, look at the debt. This is just a little slide that I haven't taken off. Pick your data based upon pre-corona projections and post-corona corrections, and we'll have an idea. Because here we go. This is where we're showing where we were going on that flat part of that curve. Let me see if I can pull it back up. Killed it. There we are. There's the flat part of the curve. You see that flat part of the curve? That's where we were pre-corona impact to the economy. And now, here we go. This is what's happened when we started our spending. So this is our public debt as a result of this buying everything on the credit card. I mean, we put how much money to the Kennedy Center for the Arts? Now, that's not corona-based. And they turn around and laid off their musicians, which is crazy. So what we've done is this is the path we were on till Rona hit. Now we've bound all that debt. Now, why am I bringing this? Is this to bash politics? No, it's not. Quite honestly, it's because when the debt goes up, we're watering down our purchasing power. And that's going to affect our purchasing capabilities. Now, here's an older slide we had back from April. And we're going into June, this last quarter, and we saw that even during the coronavirus outbreak in Tennessee, in Middle Tennessee, our prices never went negative. Now, we may have dropped some of the gain, but they didn't go negative. And part of that's going to be if you want to invest in real estate in Middle Tennessee, we know that we'll have people logically moving from these dense population centers to less dense population center, because as the job losses mount and the revenues fall, people are going to be taxed more, and the ones who can afford to move are going to move, and the ones who can't are going to remain there. So you end up, the mobility factor works that when you have more money, you move, and you can avoid the impact of a downturn, and the poor stay, the rich leave. I mean, that's a nice way to look at it. And you might say, well, how's that going to affect Nashville? Nashville's fairly dense. Yes, but not on the comparison to DC, Detroit, LA, and some of these other cities. Yes, we're dense, but we're not as dense. So we'll be more attractive to that type of urbanite type of person. Will leave those areas and move to Middle Tennessee. And I don't expect our prices to really fall. The professionals, the experts, they're smarter than me, don't expect our prices to fall. What's going to happen in the pricing is going to get back to the cost of money and the debt. And if I can find which one I'm looking at, here we are. This debt we're taking on will have an inflation impact. will impact inflation. And so the cost of goods are going to go up. So I don't see the cost of construction and replacement in residential homes to get particularly better. If you're looking for a bargain, I don't see it happening. Excuse me. And if I get back to the year, this is the pre-Dodd-Frank. This is the crash years when we were just spending money like drunken sailors. No offense to drunken sailors. But when we were just spending money, this is what were happening. We were throwing debt. Crazy, crazy, crazy debt. And then we had a collapse. That's not what we have going on now. What we have going on now is, in fact, an artificial impact to our economy. But the effect will be real, and it will be felt. And inflation's coming. I think you can pretty well much get that. We're going to be so much better off than the rest of the country because of our fiscal policy. Tennessee has a balanced budget amendment requirement, which means they can't top that credit card off. I don't know if I think I may have killed that particular one off, but there's our credit card. As long as you keep spending money, people are going to do it. And that's unfortunately what's happened for a lot of states that aren't Tennessee. So be glad you live in Tennessee. Our future is good, but I expect to see population driven out of those other areas into Tennessee. Now that's just what I expect. I expect we're going to be the beneficiary of it, and we're not going to have the unemployment growth sustained over a period of time that we have in other places. So I think we're in good shape. I think we're in the best of the bad shape, I should say. And I think the future is very good. I think our housing prices are going to continue to go up. I think we're going to have very low demand as people come into our area. And I think that's about where we're going to be. And about time we close this one off.